People always asked me why I preferred the company of machines to the company of men. The answer was simple. Machines don't lie. If a gear breaks, it's because of stress or rust. It's honest. Men? Men break for reasons you can't see. My name is Kael, and until this morning, my biggest worry was the calibration of the West Windmill. Highwind was a paradise, a floating jewel in a sea of clouds. But paradises are fragile things. They make you soft. They make you forget that beneath the clouds, wolves are waiting. The silence broke first. Then came the shadow. It wasn't a cloud. Clouds drift. They wander. This shadow marched. I stepped out of my workshop, wiping the grease from my hands. The sky, usually a brilliant azure, was choked by iron. They were massive, flying fortresses of black steel, bearing the crimson sigil of the Obsidian Empire. I didn't feel fear immediately. I felt a cold, analytical shock. My brain tried to calculate the tonnage of those ships, the fuel required to keep them aloft. But then I saw where they were landing. The town square. My father was there. I ran. My lungs burned as I sprinted through the cobblestone streets I had known my whole life. The soldiers were already there. They weren't a disorderly mob. They were a machine. Efficient. Ruthless. They pushed the villagers aside like debris. I saw him then. General Vane. He didn't look like a warrior. He didn't carry a massive sword or scream battle cries. He stood perfectly still, his hands clasped behind his back, watching the chaos with the bored expression of a tax collector. He was talking to my father. I heard Vane's voice. It was smooth, like oil on a blade. He said, "The gravity core. Give it to me, and I will spare your lives." It was a lie. I knew it instantly. The gravity core wasn't just a power source. It was the heart of Highwind. Without it, the laws of physics would reclaim us. We would fall. My father knew it too. "You are asking for our death," he spat back. Vane sighed, as if disappointed by my father's lack of cooperation. He snapped his fingers. 2 soldiers grabbed my father. Analysis time was over. I didn't have a weapon. I had a heavy iron wrench tucked into my belt. It wasn't designed for war, but physics applies to skulls just as well as it applies to bolts. I charged. The element of surprise is a powerful multiplier. I swung the wrench with all my weight, connecting with the helmet of the first guard. The metal rang out, a sickening, satisfying crunch. He went down. "Let him go!" I screamed. For a moment, I thought I could do it. I thought righteous anger was enough. I ducked under a spear, used the momentum to shove another soldier into the wall. But I was one boy against an empire. A heavy gauntlet struck me from behind. The world spun. I hit the ground, tasting blood and dust. I looked up, my vision blurring. Vane hadn't even moved. He looked at me not with anger, but with pity. "Brave," Vane said, "but bravery without power is just suicide." Then they ripped the core from the earth. The sound was deafening. It sounded like the sky itself was tearing open. As the blue light of the core faded into the belly of the Empire's ship, the ground beneath us groaned. Gravity, once our friend, became our executioner. Highwind began to tilt. Buildings I had known since childhood crumbled like dry sand. The bakery, the school, the council hall, sliding into the abyss. The soldiers retreated to their ships, their mission complete. They left us to fall. I crawled toward my father. He was bleeding, crushed under a fallen beam. "Dad!" I choked out, trying to lift the wood. It was too heavy. He grabbed my hand. His grip was weak, trembling. He pressed something cold into my palm. A golden compass. But the needle didn't point north. It spun wildly, humming with a faint energy.
"Listen to me, Kael," he whispered. "The sanctuary, the city of clouds, it's real." "I'm not leaving you," I sobbed. Logic had abandoned me. I was just a terrified son. "You must," he coughed. "You are the only one who can fly the glider. Warn them. If you die here, our history dies with you." The ground split between us. The workshop, my sanctuary, was sliding toward the edge. My glider was inside. "Go!" he screamed, a final burst of strength. "That is a command." I turned my back on him. It was the hardest thing I have ever done. I ran. I ran toward the edge of the world. I threw myself into the cockpit of the glider, my fingers flying over the controls by instinct. Ignition, flaps, release. And as the ground fell away completely, I pulled the lever. The wings snapped open. The wind caught me. I soared upward, fighting the turbulence. I looked back one last time. Highwind broke apart. Thousands of tons of rock, history, and life swallowed by the clouds below. Silence returned. I was alone in the vast, empty sky. I gripped the golden compass until my knuckles turned white. Vane thought he had won. He thought he had crushed us. But he made a mistake. He left an engineer alive, and I was going to dismantle his empire, piece by piece.
Woke up to the taste of ash and the screaming of metal. My glider, the Sparrow, was designed to withstand high-altitude winds, not a crash landing on a jagged rock. I pulled myself out of the wreckage, my body bruising, my head spinning. I ran a diagnostic on myself: 3 broken ribs, a concussion, dehydration. Bad, but survivable. Then I looked at my machine. The left wing was snapped in half. The engine was smoking. My father was dead. My home was gone. And now my wings were broken. For the first time in my life, I didn't have a plan. I sat on the scorched earth of this unknown island and waited for the despair to kill me. But engineers don't just give up. We fix things. I forced myself to stand, one problem at a time, I whispered. Find water, find shelter, fix the wing. This place was known as the Shattered Isles, a graveyard of old floating rocks that drifted aimlessly in the lower atmosphere. It was a wasteland. The air here was thin and smelled of sulfur. I walked for hours. The compass my father gave me was heavy in my pocket. Every time I touched it, I felt a pulse of heat, like a heartbeat. It was trying to tell me something, but I was too angry to listen. That's when I saw the smoke, not from my crash, but from a campfire. I froze. Instinct told me to hide. Was it the Empire? Had they followed me? I crept through the dead trees, gripping my wrench, my only weapon. I moved silently, calculating my approach. In the clearing, there was no soldier. There was a girl. She wore a traveler's cloak, dusty and patched, with a hood pulled low. She was kneeling by a small fire, boiling water in a copper pot. She wasn't armed with a sword or a gun. She was sorting herbs. I stepped on a dry twig. Snap. She didn't jump. She didn't scream. She simply spoke, without turning around. "You're loud for a spy," she said. Her voice was calm, almost melodic, but with an edge of steel. "And you're bleeding on my moss." I stepped into the light, holding my wrench tight. "Who are you?" She turned then. Her eyes were sharp, intelligent. She looked at my weapon, then at my face. She saw the grease, the burns, the desperation. "I am Layla," she said, standing up. "And you look like you fell out of the sky." "I am Kael, from Highwind." The name made her pause. A shadow passed over her face. Highwind. I saw the smoke from the west. The Empire? They took everything, I replied, my voice cracking. They are looking for me. Then you are a fool for standing in the open, she said quickly. She kicked dirt over her fire, extinguishing it instantly. Get down. She grabbed my arm and pulled me behind a large boulder. I opened my mouth to protest, but then I heard it. The low, mechanical hum. An Empire drone. It drifted over the clearing, a floating sphere of black metal with a glowing red eye. It was scanning for survivors. It was hunting. I tightened my grip on the wrench. I could take it out, if I timed the throw perfectly. Layla's hand clamped over my wrist. Don't, she whispered. It's a scout. If you destroy it, 3 more will come. Logic, Kael, not anger. I looked at her. She was right. It was a variable I hadn't considered in my rage. We waited, holding our breath, until the red light faded into the distance. When the silence returned, I slumped against the rock. The adrenaline faded, leaving only pain. Layla looked at my ribs. You need healing before you need revenge, she said. She opened a small pouch at her belt. I'm not a warrior, Kael. I'm a healer. I fix people. It seems you and I have a lot of work to do. Why help me? I asked. You don't know me. She looked at the sky where the drone had vanished. Because the Empire burned my village 2 years ago. We are all debris in their wake. She extended a hand. You have a broken ship. I have a map of the safe routes, but no way to travel. Perhaps we can help each other. I looked at her hand. Then I looked at the golden compass in my pocket. It was vibrating again. I realized then that my father's command was not just to survive, it was to find allies. I took her hand. My ship needs parts, rare metal, hard to find. Layla smiled, a small, mysterious smile. I know a scavenger's market 2 islands east, but it's dangerous. I don't mind dangerous, I said, standing up. I just need to fly. We walked for 2 days. My ribs ached with every step, a constant, dull thumping that reminded me of my failure. But Layla was relentless. She moved through the jagged terrain of the shattered isles like a ghost, silent and efficient. She taught me how to find water in the roots of dried trees. She showed me which clouds carried acid rain and which ones were safe. I was an expert on engines and aerodynamics, but out here in the wild, I was a toddler. Without her, I would have been dead 3 times over. We are here, Layla whispered, pointing to a towering structure in the distance. It was called the Rust Spire. It was a vertical city built entirely out of scrap metal, old ship parts, and debris, welded together into a chaotic tower that pierced the smog. It was ugly. It was dangerous. But to me, it looked like a hardware store. Keep your hood up, Layla warned as we crossed the creaking suspension bridge. People here sell information as quickly as they sell scrap. If they know you are from Highwind, the Empire will know within the hour. I pulled my scarf over my face. We entered the market. The noise hit me first. The grinding of metal, the shouting of merchants, the hiss of steam. It smelled of ozone and greed. We navigated through the crowded stalls. I saw engines from the pre-war era, stolen navigation charts, and weapons that were illegal in civilized sectors. My fingers itched. I wanted to study everything, to take it apart and see how it worked. But we had a mission. Focus, Kael, Layla murmured, sensing my distraction. We need a combustion regulator and raw titanium. Where do we go? I scanned the stalls. My eyes didn't look for the shiniest sign. I looked for the quality of the tools. There, I said, pointing to a dark, oily shop tucked in a corner. The mechanic there organizes his wrenches by size and wear. He knows his craft. The shop owner was a massive man with a cybernetic arm that whirred every time he moved. He was welding a plate onto a rusted bike.
He stopped when he saw us. "We're closing," he grunted, not looking up. "I need a Phase 2 combustion regulator and 3 sheets of aerospace-grade titanium." The man laughed. It was a dry, rasping sound. He put down his welding torch and looked at me. "Phase 2 parts are Empire tech, boy. Very rare, very expensive. You got gold?" I looked at Layla. We had nothing, just survival rations. "I don't have gold," I said calmly. The man sneered and reached for a heavy hammer on his desk. "Then get out of my shop before I scrap you for parts." Layla stepped back, her hand moving to her belt, but I held up a hand. I had noticed something. Behind the man, a massive power generator was sputtering. It was coughing black smoke, and the rhythm of the pistons was off. "Your generator," I said. "The intake valve is clogged. That's why your welding torch is losing heat. It's going to seize up in less than 10 minutes. When it does, it will blow this whole shop into the sky." The man froze. He looked at the generator, then back at me. "You're bluffing." "I'm an engineer," I said. "I listen to machines. And yours is screaming." As if on cue, the generator let out a loud bang, and sparks flew across the room. The lights flickered. The man looked terrified. He didn't know how to fix it. He only knew how to use it. "Fix it!" he growled. "If you fix it, you get the titanium." I didn't hesitate. I dropped my bag and went to work. For 20 minutes, the world disappeared. It was just me and the machine. I bypassed the clogged valve, rerouted the fuel line, and calibrated the pressure. My hands moved faster than they ever had. This was my language. I tightened the final bolt and hit the starter. The generator roared to life, but this time it purred. Smooth, efficient. The lights in the shop burned brighter than before. I wiped the oil from my hands and stood up. The merchant stared at the machine with his mouth open. He looked at me with a new expression. Not anger, respect. "Who are you?" he asked quietly. "Kids round here don't learn mechanics like that." "Just a traveler," I said, keeping my face hidden. "We have a deal?" He nodded slowly. He went to the back and returned with a heavy box, the regulator, the titanium, and he threw in a bag of bolts. "Take it, and take the back exit. If you can fix machines like that, people will want to own you. Stay hidden." We left the shop, the heavy box in my arms. We had done it. But as we merged back into the crowd, the hair on the back of my neck stood up. The compass in my pocket suddenly became scorching hot against my leg. I grabbed Layla's shoulder. "Wait." "What is it?" she asked. I looked up towards the upper levels of the spire. Standing on a balcony, watching us through a long brass telescope, was a figure in a gray cloak. He lowered the telescope and pulled out a communication device. "We've been spotted," I whispered. "We need to move. Now." The victory of the repair faded instantly. We had the parts to fix my wings, but the hunters had found our scent. The race was back on.
The compass in my pocket was burning hot now. It wasn't just a guide, it was a warning system. The closer the danger came, the hotter it got. And right now, it felt like a coal against my leg. "Run!" Layla hissed. We didn't wait for the man on the balcony to issue orders. We bolted through the narrow alleyways of the rust spire. Behind us, the heavy sound of boots on metal echoed. They weren't soldiers, they were mercenaries. The Empire paid well for rats who could catch mice. "This way!" Layla grabbed my jacket and pulled me toward a ventilation shaft. "It leads to the lower levels, the scrap yard." We slid down the chute, landing in a pile of ash and refuse at the base of the spire. The air here was thick with fog. We were hidden, but for how long? We sprinted back toward the crash site where my broken glider lay waiting. My lungs were burning, and the heavy box of titanium parts slammed against my bruised ribs with every step. But pain is just a signal. I ignored it. We reached the wreckage as the sun began to set. casting long, blood-red shadows across the rocks. "How long to fix it?" Layla asked, scanning the horizon. She had her small knife out now. She looked terrified, but she stood firm. I looked at the shattered wing. I looked at the engine. I did the math in my head. 3 hours, I said. "You have 20 minutes, she replied. "I can hear their bikes." I dropped to my knees and opened the box. I didn't think about the mercenaries. I didn't think about the Empire. I thought about torque, tension, and heat. I stripped the broken plating off the wing. I used a portable thermal cutter, which I had scavenged from the spire, to slice the new titanium. The sparks flew around me like fireflies. Focus. Align the struts. Weld the joint. My hands moved in a blur. I was rewriting the anatomy of the machine. I bypassed the safety protocols on the engine to boost the output. It was dangerous. It might explode. But we needed speed, not safety. "Kael!" Layla screamed. I looked up. 3 hoverbikes were tearing across the wasteland toward us. They were kicking up dust, their headlights cutting through the gloom. They were armed. "Almost there!" I shouted. "I'll buy you time!" Layla yelled. She ran forward, grabbing a handful of flash powder from her pouch, a healer's trick for blinding aggressive animals. She threw it at the lead biker. A blinding flash of white light erupted. The biker swerved, crashing into the second rider. Chaos. She was brilliant, but there was still one rider left, and he was aiming a harpoon gun right at her. "Done!" I roared. I slammed the engine cowling shut and jumped into the cockpit. "Layla, get in!" She turned and sprinted toward me. The remaining mercenary fired. The harpoon slammed into the ground inches from her heel. She leapt onto the wing and scrambled into the rear seat. "Hold on!" I punched the ignition. The new regulator worked perfectly. The engine didn't just roar, it screamed. The glider shot forward. We bounced over the rocky terrain, picking up speed. 50 knots, 60 knots. The mercenary was right behind us, closing the gap. He was going to ram us before we could lift off. "We're too heavy," Layla cried. "We need more speed." I looked ahead. The cliff edge was approaching fast. Beyond it was the Sea of Storms, a wall of dark, violent clouds that surrounded the islands. Logic said, brake. Logic said, surrender. But I wasn't listening to logic anymore. I was listening to the wind. "We're not stopping," I said, gripping the stick. "We're jumping." I pushed the throttle to the maximum, past the red line. The engine whined in protest. We hit the edge of the cliff. For a second, we fell. My stomach dropped. The mercenary stopped at the edge, watching us plummet. Then, the wind caught the new titanium wing. It held. I pulled back on the stick. The glider groaned, shook, and then soared. We rocketed upward, leaving the island and the mercenaries behind. We flew straight into the dark clouds of the storm. Lightning flashed around us, illuminating the cockpit. Layla was breathing hard, clutching the back of my seat. "You're crazy," she whispered. I looked at the compass. The needle had stopped spinning. It was pointing straight ahead, through the storm. "No," I said, wiping sweat from my eyes. "I'm just an engineer who refuses to crash twice. Now, let's see what this map is hiding."
There is no silence in a storm. There is only the wind screaming like a dying animal and the thunder rattling your teeth. We were flying blind. The clouds outside the cockpit were thick and black, swirling like ink in water. Lightning flashed every few seconds, blinding us, leaving spots dancing in my eyes. "Kael, the wing!" Layla shouted over the roar of the engine. I glanced to the left. The titanium patch I had welded was holding, but the rivets were vibrating violently. If we stayed in this turbulence for another 10 minutes, the glider would tear itself apart. "I know!" I yelled back. "I need to find the updraft. Every storm has a lung, a place where it breathes." I fought the control stick. It felt heavy, like wrestling a bear. My instruments were useless. The needles were spinning wildly. The only thing that remained steady was the golden compass.
It pointed straight into the darkest part of the cloud wall. I trust the math, I whispered to myself. Trust the design. I pushed the nose of the glider down, diving straight into the heart of the thunderhead. Layla gasped, gripping her seatbelt. The pressure in the cabin spiked, my ears popped. The world went dark. And then, silence. We punched through the wall of the storm and emerged into the eye. It was a pocket of absolute calm in the center of the chaos. The sun was filtering down from above in God rays, illuminating the mist. But we weren't looking at the light. We were looking at what was floating inside the eye. "By the stars!" Layla breathed. It was a graveyard. Floating in the stillness were dozens, maybe hundreds of ancient ships. They were massive, some as big as cities, rotting quietly in the sky. These weren't empire ships. These were designs I had never seen, built from stone and bronze, covered in moss and vines. They were the skeletons of a forgotten age. "The graveyard of giants," Layla whispered. "I thought it was just a myth. The legends say these ships fought in the First War before the island settled." "We need the land," I said, checking my fuel gauge. "The engine is overheating. We can't cross the rest of the storm until it cools." I guided the Sparrow toward the deck of a massive, hollowed-out frigate. We touched down on the wooden planks with a soft thud. The silence here was heavy. It felt like walking into a tomb. We climbed out. The air was cold and thin. I opened the engine cowling. Smoke billowed out. It needs an hour, maybe 2. Layla walked to the edge of the ancient ship and looked down into the abyss below. "Why did the compass lead us here, Kael? This is a dead end." I pulled out the compass. She was right. The needle had stopped spinning. It was pointing directly at the ship we were standing on. "Not a dead end," I said, looking around. "A waypoint." I walked toward the captain's quarters of the ancient vessel. The door had rotted away centuries ago. Inside, skeletons of old furniture lay scattered. But on the main table, untouched by time, was a metal plate embedded in the wood. It had the same symbol as my compass. I brushed the dust away. Underneath was a series of carvings, not words, coordinates, sky charts. "It's a map," I realized, my heart racing. My father didn't just give me a direction. He sent me to find the route. I pulled out my notebook and started copying the symbols frantically. "This shows the wind currents," I explained to Layla. "Look, the storm isn't random. It's a security system. A barrier. The only way to get to the sanctuary is to ride the slipstream, a hidden current that flows under the storm." "Kael," she said. Her voice was trembling. "Just a second. I almost have it." "Kael! Look!" I turned. Layla was pointing at the fog bank we had just flown through. Something was moving in the mist. Something huge. It wasn't a ship. It moved with the fluidity of a snake. A long, scaled body, easily the length of 3 galleons, drifted silently into the air. Fins rippled along its side. A sky leviathan. The apex predator of the clouds. "It's hunting," Layla whispered. "It smells the heat of our engine." I looked at the smoking engine of the Sparrow. It was a beacon. "We can't fly," I said, panic rising in my throat. "If I start the engine now, the noise'll call it right to us. Then we have to hide." The Leviathan let out a low, mournful sound that vibrated through the deck of the ship. It turned its massive head towards us. 2 pale, blind eyes opened. We were trapped on a rotting ship with a monster circling outside, and our only escape vehicle was too hot to fly.
"Don't move," Layla mouthed. "Don't even blink."
We crouched behind the rotted railing of the ancient galleon. Above us, the sky leviathan blocked out the sun. It was immense, a floating mountain of scales and muscle. It didn't fly with wings. It swam through the air, pushed by internal gas bladders that hummed with a low, vibrating frequency. It was blind. I could see the thick, scarred tissue over its eyes, but it wasn't lost. It lowered its massive head, sniffing the air. Rows of sensory pits along its jaw flared open, glowing faintly. Thermal pits, I thought, my mind racing. It sees heat, like a viper. I looked at the sparrow. The engine was cooling, but it was still a glowing beacon of heat in the freezing air. To the beast, my glider must have looked like a bonfire in the dark. The leviathan groaned, a sound like grinding stones, and turned its body. It began to coil around our ship. It was closing in on the sparrow. "We have to distract it," I whispered. "If it touches the glider, we are stranded here forever." Layla looked around the deck. "How? We can't fight that thing." "Not a fight, a decoy." I scanned the debris on the deck. My eyes landed on an old, corroded fuel canister from the ancient ship. It was bronze, heavy, and leaked a faint blue liquid, volatile essence from a lost era. "I need a spark," I said. Layla handed me her flint and steel. I grabbed the canister and crawled across the deck. Every creak of the wood sounded like a gunshot in the silence. The leviathan paused. It turned its head toward me. It could hear my heartbeat. I froze. Sweat trickled down my forehead. The beast waited. He was testing the air. Then, slowly, it turned back toward the glider. It opened its mouth. Rows of jagged crystalline teeth glistened. It was preparing to strike. "Now or never," I whispered. I struck the flint against the steel. A spark hit the leaking blue fluid. Whoosh! The canister ignited instantly, flaring up with an intense, blinding white heat. I didn't throw it at the monster. I threw it off the side of the ship, into the abyss below. The canister fell, a streaking comet of fire. The leviathan roared, a shriek that shattered the nearby windows of the cabin. Ideally, heat means food. It dove. The massive body whipped past us, creating a gust of wind that nearly knocked me over. It chased the falling canister, diving deep into the mist below. "Go!" Layla screamed. We scrambled back to the Sparrow. I vaulted into the cockpit. "Strap in!" I hit the ignition. The engine coughed, then roared to life. The sound echoed through the canyon of clouds. From the deep mist below, an angry roar answered. The beast realized it had been tricked. It was coming back up, fast. "Coordinates set!" I yelled. "Hanging on!" I pushed the throttle forward. We didn't fly up. We flew down, following the ancient map. "Where are you going?" Layla cried, looking at the wall of clouds rushing toward us. "The slipstream!" I shouted. "Under the storm!" We dove off the edge of the ancient ship just as the Leviathan's jaws snapped shut on the empty deck where we had been seconds ago. We plunged into the thick gray fog. Visibility dropped to 0. The turbulence shook us like a toy. "Trust the numbers," I gritted out, fighting the stick. "Trust the map!" Then suddenly, the shaking stopped. The gray fog vanished. We shot out into a tunnel of clear air, surrounded on all sides by the spinning walls of the storm. It was a tube of calm wind, flowing like a river, the slipstream. We were moving incredibly fast, carried by the current. The Leviathan was gone, lost in the storm above. I slumped back in my seat, exhaling a breath I didn't know I was holding. "We made it," I said. Layla looked out at the tunnel of wind. "You crazy engineer," she said, but she was smiling. I looked at the compass. The needle was steady now, pointing straight down the tunnel, toward the sanctuary. But as I looked ahead, I saw something that made my blood run cold. At the end of the tunnel, blocking the path, was a blockade. Not a monster. Ships. Empire ships. They had found the entrance too.
The slipstream was a highway of wind. We were moving at impossible speeds, carried by the current. There was no way to turn back. And ahead of us, blocking the exit, was the Iron Gate. It wasn't a physical gate. It was a formation of 6 Empire warships, locked in a hexagonal pattern. They had deployed a stasis net, a web of purple energy beams connecting the ships. Anything that touched those beams would be fried instantly. "They found the current," Layla said, her voice hollow. "They knew we would come here." "They didn't find it," I corrected, staring at the flagship in the center. "They forced it open." The central ship was massive. It was the Obsidian King, General Vane's personal fortress, and hanging from its underside, pulsing with a tortured blue light, was the gravity core. My village's heart. Vane was using it to stabilize the storm so his ships could wait for us. "We have to stop," Layla grabbed my arm. "We can't," I said. "The wind is pushing us. If I use the reverse thrusters, the heat flare will show up on their sensors instantly. We'll be shot down before we slow down." I looked at the blockade. It was a wall of death, but every wall has a crack. "Layla, power down your suit. Turn off the radio, turn off the heating." "What? We'll freeze!" "Do it!" I reached for the main breaker of the Sparrow. The Empire scanners are looking for energy signatures, heat, electricity, engine vibration. If we have none of those, we are just debris. "We are debris that is going to crash into a laser grid," she argued. "Not if I calculate the drift correctly." I took a deep breath. My hand hovered over the switch. "Hold your breath," I whispered. I killed the power. The engine died. The cockpit went dark. The hum of the machine vanished. Suddenly, we were just a piece of metal falling through the wind. The silence was terrifying. We drifted toward the blockade. The purple lasers of the stasis net buzzed angrily. We were heading straight for the gap between the flagship and a destroyer. It was a gap of maybe 50 meters. At this speed, that was the eye of a needle. I gripped the control stick, but without power, the hydraulics were stiff. I had to use all my strength just to tilt the wings a fraction of an inch. We grew closer. The shadow of the Obsidian King swallowed us. I could see the soldiers on the deck. I could see the rivets on the hull. We were so close, I could almost touch the black metal. "Don't sneeze. Don't move." A red scanning beam swept over our cockpit. I froze, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. The beam passed us. It didn't turn orange. It didn't lock on. To them, we were just a piece of scrap from the storm. We slipped between the two ships. The purple energy of the net crackled just inches from my left wingtip. I could smell the ozone through the seals. And then, we were through. We drifted into the open sky on the other side. I waited 10 seconds, 20 seconds. "Okay," I whispered. "Restarting." I flipped the switch. The engine sputtered and caught. The lights flickered back on. Layla gasped, sucking in air as if she had been drowning. "We're alive!" She shook her head in disbelief. "We're actually alive!" "Don't celebrate yet," I said, looking ahead. The clouds had cleared completely. In front of us, bathed in the light of a twin sunset, was the destination. It wasn't just a city. It was a miracle. Immense white towers spiraled upward, connected by bridges of solid light. Waterfalls cascaded from floating gardens into the mist below. It was beautiful. It was ancient. The sanctuary, the city of clouds. But as we flew closer, I saw the smoke rising from the lower districts. We weren't the first ones here. I realized Vane sent a scouting party ahead. The blockade wasn't to stop us from getting in. It was to stop anyone from getting out. I pushed the throttle forward. "Get your medical kit ready, Layla," I said grimly. "We aren't walking into a sanctuary. We're walking into a war zone."
We landed hard on a marble platform, skidding to a halt amidst a shower of sparks. The sanctuary was dying. Up close, the white towers were scorched black. The beautiful bridges of light were flickering.
The air smelled of ozone and burnt flesh. "Get down!" Layla tackled me just as a beam of red energy sliced through the air where my head had been. We rolled behind a statue of a winged lion. Ahead of us, a squad of sanctuary guardians, tall warriors in white and gold armor, were pinned down by heavy fire. They were fighting with spears that shot bolts of lightning, but they were losing. Their enemy was the Empire's elite, shadow troopers, soldiers in matte black armor with jetpacks, moving with terrifying speed. "They are being flanked," Layla pointed to the right. 3 troopers were moving to surround the guardians. "Not if I can help it," I said. I grabbed a heavy coil of copper wire and a portable battery from the back of the Sparrow. "Cover me!" I yelled. Layla popped up, throwing a smoke bomb she had crafted from crushed herbs. It wasn't much, but the gray cloud confused the trooper's sensors for a split second. I sprinted. I didn't run at the soldiers. I ran at the environment. The sanctuary was powered by hard light technology. The floor itself was a grid of energy. I slid toward a junction box on the wall, ripped off the cover with my wrench, and jammed the copper wire into the main terminal. "Physics lesson number 1, I gritted out, connecting the battery. "Resistance creates heat." I overloaded the circuit. The floor beneath the shadow troopers turned blindingly bright, then exploded in a shockwave of pure electricity. The troopers were thrown backward, their jetpacks short-circuiting. They fell into the abyss below the city. The Guardians stopped firing, stunned. One of them, a tall woman with a bloody bandage around her arm, stepped forward. She aimed her spear at me. "Identify yourself," she commanded. Her voice was fierce, but I heard the fear in it. "I am Kael of Highwind, and this is Layla. We came to help." She looked at the smoking junction box and then at the fallen Empire soldiers. She lowered her spear. "I am Commander Sol. You fight strangely, Highwind, but you fight well." "I saw the blockade," I said. "General Vane is here?" "He is already at the inner gates. He has brought a warwalker, a tank on legs. It is tearing through our defenses. He is heading for the Tower of Winds." "The tower?" I asked. "What does he want there?" "The tower controls the defense shield. If he captures it, he can turn the city's own weapons against us. We are trying to hold the bridge, but—" A massive explosion shook the ground. Dust rained down from the towers above. "We have to go," I said, looking at the smoke rising from the city center. "You should flee," Sol warned. "The warwalker is invincible. Our spears bounce off its hull." I looked at Layla. She was already bandaging the arm of a wounded young soldier. She looked up at me and nodded. We weren't running. I turned back to Sol. "Commander," I said, pulling my wrench from my belt, "I'm an engineer. There is no such thing as an invincible machine. There are only machines I haven't taken apart yet. Take me to that tank." Sol stared at me for a moment, then signaled her remaining troops. "Move out," she ordered. "Protect the engineer." We ran toward the center of the city, crossing bridges of light that hummed under our boots. The sound of mechanical stomping grew louder with every step. Vane was close, and for the first time since my village fell, I wasn't running away from him. I was running toward him.
We rounded the final corner, and the Bridge of Ascension stretched out before us. It was a masterpiece of light, suspended over a drop of 1,000 meters. But blocking the path was a nightmare. The Warwalker. It was 4 stories tall, a crab-like fortress of black steel walking on 6 hydraulic legs. Its main cannon was charging, emitting a high-pitched whine that made my teeth ache. "Scatter!" Commander Sol screamed. She dove to the left just as the cannon fired. A beam of purple energy hit the tower behind us, vaporizing a stone pillar instantly. The Guardians returned fire with their lightning spears, but the bolts just splashed harmlessly against the Walker's energy shields. It was like throwing pebbles at a mountain.
We can't scratch it, Soul yelled, rolling behind debris. The shielding is too thick. I crouched behind a barrier, watching the machine. Fear paralyzed me for a second. It was a monster. No, I corrected myself, forcing my breathing to slow. It's a design. A design has parameters. A design has flaws. I watched it move. It was heavy, incredibly heavy. Every time one of its massive legs slammed down, the hard light bridge flickered beneath it. The bridge was struggling to support the tonnage. "Layla!" I shouted over the noise of gunfire. "Do you see the bridge? The floor panels?" "They are flickering," she replied, firing her crossbow at the walker's sensory cameras. "It's too heavy," I said, a plan forming in my mind. "The bridge uses a harmonic frequency to stay solid. If I can disrupt that frequency, the light turns back into air." "You want to turn off the bridge?" Soul asked, crawling toward us. "We'll all fall." "Not the whole bridge, just the section under its feet. But I need to get close. I need to get to the control node underneath the deck." "That is suicide," Soul said flatly. "It has auto turrets targeting anything that moves." "Then give it something bigger to target," Layla said. She looked at Soul. "Draw its fire, high and loud. Kael goes low." Soul grit her teeth. She stood up, her armor glowing. "Guardians, focus fire on the visual sensors. Blind the beast. For the sanctuary!" The Guardians roared and broke cover, firing everything they had at the walker's head. The machine turned its massive body, distracted by the sudden aggression. "Go!" Layla pushed me. I sprinted. I didn't look at the cannon. I looked at the floor. I reached the edge of the bridge and jumped over the railing. I landed on the maintenance walkway underneath, dangling over the abyss. The wind whipped at my clothes. Above me, the war walker stomped, shaking the entire structure. Dust and debris rained down on me. I crawled along the catwalk until I was directly under the beast. I could hear the gears grinding above my head. I found the frequency node, a glowing crystal box humming with power. I smashed the casing with my wrench. "Okay," I muttered, sweat stinging my eyes. "Let's introduce a little chaos." I ripped out the blue stabilizer crystals and jammed my wrench into the socket, bridging the connection with raw iron. The energy surged through my arm, burning my skin, but I held on. The bridge above screamed. The hard light turned from white to an angry, unstable red. Then it vanished. For a split second, the war walker stepped on nothing but air. The machine lurched. Its front legs plunged through the phantom floor. The immense weight dragged the rest of the body down. It tried to fire its thrusters to correct itself, but it was too late. With a sound of tearing metal, the Titan slipped. It crashed through the maintenance walkway, missing me by inches, and plummeted into the clouds below. I lay on the catwalk, gasping for air, clutching my burned arm. Silence returned to the bridge. The hard light flickered and solidified again, closing the hole. I climbed back up to the deck. Soul and the Guardians were staring at the empty space where the monster had been. Layla ran to me, checking my arm immediately. "You crazy, brilliant idiot!" I looked toward the end of the bridge. The path to the Tower of Winds was open. But standing at the towering doors of the entrance was a single figure, waiting. He clapped. A slow, mocking applause. General Vane. "An impressive trick, boy. You broke my toy. But do you have the courage to face the master?" I picked up my wrench. "I don't need courage. I just need to finish this," I said to Layla and Soul. We walked toward the tower. The final test.
had begun. The inside of the Tower of Winds was not a room. It was a vortex. In the center of the vast chamber, hovering above a pedestal of white stone, was the gravity core from my village. It was screaming, not a sound you hear with your ears, but a vibration you feel in your bones. Vane stood next to it. He was wearing a prototype exoskeleton suit, connected directly to the core by thick black cables. He was draining its power to fuel himself. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Vane said. His voice echoed, amplified by the machine. "Infinite energy. With this, I won't just control the Empire. I will control the sky itself. I will decide which islands float and which ones fall." "It's unstable," I shouted, stepping forward. "Look at the color. It's turning violet. You are overloading the matrix. You'll destroy the sanctuary." "Progress requires risk," Vane sneered. He raised his gauntlet. Gravity slammed into me. It felt like an invisible hand crushing me into the floor. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. Layla and Saul were pinned against the wall behind me, struggling to stand. "You are a smart boy, Kael." Vane walked toward me, heavy and slow. "You are small. You think small. You fix gears. I build empires." He stood over me. The pressure was breaking my bones. My vision was swimming. I looked at the core. It was pulsing erratically. Vane was right. I was an engineer. I fixed gears. And I knew that when a gear spins too fast, it doesn't just break, it shatters. I looked at the golden compass in my hand. It was vibrating so hard it cut my palm. It wasn't just pointing to the sanctuary, it was a tuning fork. It resonated with the core. "Layla!" I wheezed, fighting the crushing weight. "The flash powder! The bag!" Layla didn't ask questions. Even pinned against the wall, she managed to kick her pouch across the floor. It slid toward me. Vane laughed. "Dust? You want to throw dust at a god?" "Not dust," I whispered, gripping the pouch. "Fuel." I didn't throw it at Vane. I threw it into the exposed intake vent of his exoskeleton suit. The flash powder was magnesium-based. It burned hot and fast. When it hit the cooling fans of his suit, it didn't just burn, it exploded inside his armor. Vane screamed as his suit backfired. The connection to the core was severed for a split second. The gravity field vanished. I stood up. My body screamed in pain, but I didn't stop. I sprinted toward the core. "Don't touch it!" Vane roared, stumbling back, smoke pouring from his shoulder. "You'll kill us all!" "No," I said, reaching for the controls on the pedestal. "I'm recalibrating." I didn't try to shut it down. That would cause a detonation. Instead, I reversed the polarity. I spun the containment ring in the opposite direction. The core whined. The violet light turned back to a soft, calming blue. But the backlash of energy had to go somewhere. It shot out of the cables, straight back into Vane's suit. "No!" Vane shrieked. The gravity engine on his back engaged at full power, but in reverse. He wasn't pushed down, he was pulled up. Vane was lifted off his feet, flailing. The roof of the tower was open to the sky. "You wanted to control the sky?" I yelled over the roar of the wind. "Then go!" With a final boom, Vane was launched like a cannonball, shot upwards into the stratosphere, carried away by the violent currents of the slipstream. He was gone. The silence that followed was deafening. The core hummed peacefully, floating back into its resting rhythm. The sanctuary stopped shaking. I fell to my knees. Layla was there instantly, holding me up. Saul walked over, looking at the empty sky where the tyrant had vanished. "He is gone," Saul said, disbelief in her voice. "The Empire, the blockade. Without him, they will scatter." "They will be back," I said, breathing hard, "but not today." We stayed in the sanctuary for a month. We repaired the towers. We healed the wounded. Saul asked us to stay. She offered me a place in the Council of Engineers. She offered Layla a place in the Temple of Healing. It was a good life, a safe life. I stood on the balcony looking at the horizon. The Sparrow was repaired, gleaming with new white plating and a reinforced engine. Layla walked up beside me. She didn't have to ask.
"The compass is still spinning, isn't it?" she said softly. I pulled it out. The needle was drifting, pointing east toward the unknown lands. My father's map has more than one destination. Vane was just one symptom of the disease. The Empire is still out there, and there are other islands falling. I packed the supplies. Layla smiled, pulling up her hood, and I added a second seat to the glider. It was getting cramped. I looked at her. I realized then that I hadn't just found a co-pilot. I had found a reason to keep flying. I climbed into the cockpit. The engine purred, a sound of pure potential. I am no longer just a mechanic from a fallen village. I am Kael, and I am the architect of the storm. And our story is just beginning.